Welcome back to Scale Modelling Weekly. This is episode 3. So in this episode I'm carrying on from last week's episode where we were looking at the initial breakdown when it comes to looking at short run kits. So basically thinking about planning whether it's the best kit available. You only pick a short run kit if there is no other option. And looking at why you would choose that kit and what the pros and cons to it are, recessed panel lines, all that sort of thing. And in this one we're going to take that just a step further and have a look at some of the building issues that come about when building a short run kit. So we've got the RS models HE112 in this particular one, which I've got here. I do mention why it's not made it to the channel, and it's because I got it to the paint stage, I filmed the whole thing, and then got paint peeling off in the masking, and it was just every time I masked one bit it would peel off in another bit, and basically lost patience with it. However, it's not definitely gone. I mean, looking at it now, I was probably in a bad mood, so really if I just masked up, sanded back, I could probably touch that up. So you never know, it may see the light of day. And the second one is, in this feature that I use, is footage from the Miles Hawk build that I did a year ago, which was SBS Models Resin Miles Hawk. So just talk about working with resin and some of the things you need to look at there. If you're interested in seeing that full build video, I'll put it up as one of the clickable sort of captions at the end of the video and in the description below. So thanks for joining and staying tuned to this series, and without further ado, let's get into it. Okay, so as I just mentioned, here we're going to have the part 2 to look at dealing with short run kits. So we were talking about the planning phase in episode 2, and now in episode 3 we're going to have an actual look at what you get as a short run kit, some of the ways you need to work around it. So here we've got a 1/72 HE112 from RS Models. And it's a multimedia kit. You've got photo etch, you've got resin, and what you often get is what's happened here is, so they can do different versions, you've got a section cut out of the fuselage half, and it's predictably not a very good fit. So that's your first headache. You can see here just at the front there where the exhaust goes, just behind where the propeller would be on the end, there's a section that goes in there. Equally, when we get down to the landing gear, they're overcomplicating it by giving you photo etch for the landing gear doors, which is nice, it's very thin, but they're actually not quite right for this version, because it puts the gear door at a slant, which you'll see here, and it's meant to be more or less flat along the bottom, and even using the kit part it's still not flat, and you can see that there's not really any worth in having the photo etch part there. So the kit part's perfectly adequate, especially in 1/72 scale. So you often find this with short run kits, that they can almost give you extras which are a little bit more work, and there's no real effort, there's no real gain to it. So that's one thing to bear in mind. It's always worth checking through. And here you can see that the good news is some kits are very good. The fit in this is actually really quite good when you get it all done. There's just some things that perhaps are either overcomplicated or not quite thought about in quite the same way. Now, this isn't always the case with a short run kit, but here you've almost got a snap fit with the lower portion of the wing joining the fuselage, so that's really good. And when I get the upper parts of the wings on, you'll see that that's also a good join there as well with the wing join. So you can get very good things and you can get very bad things. So you just got to sort of look through the build and kind of plan how you're going to go about it. And here you can see, obviously, it's a really good join, surprisingly so. And you get a detailed cockpit as well. Usually there's photo etch, everything's dealt with. So that's not always the case. You've got to look at it from a kit by kit basis, really. But certainly this RS Models one came with everything you needed. Now there were a couple things that weren't quite right, which I go ahead and fix here. Where the radiator joins in the under part of the fuselage, it's meant to sit quite a lot lower. So I fixed that by having a bit of plasticard. And here you can see the tailplane section as well, which goes on lovely. Again, brilliant joints. So they're not, you don't have to worry so much about them. And generally with short run builds, I find super glue is very useful as well, as it works as a gap filler as well as joining the parts. Quite often you will get vac form kits, vac form canopies. So that's another thing you've got to bear in mind. Vac form's quite a bit different to for a canopy in the way of working with, as opposed to using injection molded canopies. So here I've got to drill out the part for the aerial, which goes right through the canopy. So there's all sorts of things you've got to think about. So again, it just comes down to planning the build, having a look at the kit, looking at reviews, looking online at the kit part breakdown as well. Here you can see where I'm going to try and fix this radiator. So what is actually happening is it's kind of a bit loose in there. This is it before I've just shown you the bit that we've just viewed. So it's a bit loose, it doesn't quite sit right. So I've filled out the area with some thick plasticard so that when you push the radiator in, not only does it sit quite a lot tighter, it also sits lower down as well, which is what it's meant to. It's quite a it does sit quite low, so using reference pictures helps a great deal when you come to these sort of things. And I'm also starting to add a bit of filler here as well, and we've still got a join there in that front section where around the exhaust that isn't quite right. So you've just got to bite the bullet, and generally you're buying short run kits and you're building short run kits to get a version of an aircraft or a subject that is not widely available and isn't going to be widely available. And even after primer, I'm still dealing with that section there at the front. So you would know, I knew that going into it, that was going to be the main thing I had to get sorted. So that's really, you know, a run through of short run kits. Now if we have a look at resin kits as well, which kind of fall into the same category, and this also helps because you'd be dealing with resin in short run kits at the same time as well. Resin is quite different. Obviously we can't use plastic glues for resin kits and resin parts. We've got to be using super glues or CA glues, and also resin. From a resin kit point of view, I would certainly advise going for the best and then working down from that. SBS models, in my view, are one of the best resin kit producers. This is an SBS model, so it's just really a step down compared to the injection molded kit. As far as quality and build's concerned. You've got butt joins there on the wings, so that's something you've got to think about. And in this build I actually drill holes and put some metal rods in there to help with the joining. But what you'll find from resin kit is you can get a much finer finish. So leading edges, trailing edges, much more crisply done, much more finer details right the way across the model. And you don't tend to have to add anything to it. You usually get a seat with seat belts already included, or you'll get photo etch to sort that out as well. So right the way across the board, it is a very, very detailed model, and you're just going to have to put the time in to actually get the model built to a standard where you're going to be able to show that off. Here you've got obviously resin wheels, which is a great thing, and we've also got a resin interior, and the whole kit is resin, so to not go on repeating myself, we've got a hollowed out exhaust is a thing to notice here, and it's really good. So you don't need to worry about the details generally, and the main issue is you'll see everything is on these blocks, so we need to get them off the blocks. And for removing them from the blocks, it's best to use a razor saw, or where it's quite thin, you can use a sharp knife as well. And you also get the flash sometimes that you can see here in openings, and that, as I'm showing, is quite thin, and you can tend to just get rid of that just by using a sharp knife or pulling it apart, as I did. Resin can be slightly problematic. You don't want to be breathing the dust in, it can be an issue. So if you really want to go belt and braces, you can put a face mask on which has a good particulate filter on it, and also wetting any of the tools, so doing wet sanding and making the saw wet will capture a lot of the dust as well, and that's what I tend to do when I'm building resin kits. Here you can see other things that you'll get is actually clear acetate, where you've got to make up the windscreen. So that's different to having the vac form canopy that we saw in the last bit. Now that looks tricky, but it's actually not too bad. And here we are with a razor saw, so I'm about to get that wet, just moisten it up and make the whole area where you're going to actually cut wet as well. The more water the better, and that captures the dust, as I was saying. That's the whole point to this. And then just on a flat surface, it's best just to, you can score the line sometimes with the tip of the saw or a sharp blade as well, and then that will give you a nice groove to follow if you're using a razor saw. And then just going nice straight and flat and just going through nice and easy. I'm using the fine edge here. There's two different levels of serration on that blade, so one's a lot coarser than the other, and it gives you a different cut. Now I've obviously cut this not quite straight, so there's a little extra bit there to get off. And there we are getting some of the flash out as well, just with a knife, as I mentioned. So it's very easy stuff, and it's best to use a knife for things like that, really, because you can get good definition around the edges. And then sanding that all around will make the edges nice and sharp. And again, as we saw with RS models, this SBS models resin kit, starting with a very good resin kit, you can see that's the only real join you're going to have on the fuselage, and it's again nearly a snap fit, so you can't ask for better than that. Cheaper or more less well known resin kits might have more issues. They might have more bubbles and problems in the casting, but if you go for the highest quality, you'll tend to find that you'll get much better quality. Obviously it goes all the way through, you know, if you spend more you get more. One of the larger blocks like this, where we want a flat bottom to that chair, you want to try and get a good cut. Now that can be a little bit tricky sometimes, because you can't always get the saw in there, so you just need to get around as well as you can. I'm attacking this from both sides, which is one of the ways I found was a good way to go at it. And then just sort of going around each side, and then you can kind of lever it up and get underneath it, and then get in there with a flat blade or something like that, and then you'll be able to get rid of the block. And then it's all about flattening that base down with some sanding sticks so that it joins where it needs to go very nicely. And it is a butt join. You'll find that with resin kits, it's generally all butt joins like here. So that just goes on, so the flatter that is, the better the joint's going to be. But using CA glue and super glues means that, you know, there's a bit of leeway, and it's got filling properties as well. And it's always good to test fit, so just checking there that the cockpit floor drops in. And then once it's all painted up, you can see the details that are in there. That's all from the kit. I've not added anything. Those belts were in there, just painted them by hand, and drilled out the instrument panel dials as well. To take the next piece, which is again something a little bit different. So we've got acetate sheet there with the dials, which are clear, and then you paint that white on the background. You can put a backing on that as well, and that will show through the holes in the instrument panel. There's really nice sidewall detail there as well. So as you've got that all in one section, that fuselage, it means you've only got to worry about the seams around the door, and having everything snap into place is really useful. You do need to bear in mind that sanding resin, it's a lot softer, so you'll get rid of it a lot quicker. So you need to just sand a tiny bit, check, sand a tiny bit again, check, and so on, and carry that through when you're cutting as well, because it's very easy to take too much off, and then it's not too easy to add it back on. But it really should be attempted. It's worth having a go at short run kits and resin models, just for the diversity that you get. And there's nothing frightening about it. As long as you go into it with the right idea, it can be quite rewarding. And here you can see I'm just checking that join, so there's nothing else to look at. It's just checking around those doors that there's not a unnatural seam, and where the end of the engine goes on as well. Well, the end of the cowling, sorry. Just checking that that's all gone in nicely as well. And then the next major thing is the wing joint. So I did have a bit of an issue here, and I think that's me taking a bit too much off when I've been sanding it. But again, it was no issue because we'll just use the super glue to fill all those gaps, sand it back nice and level, and you won't know it's there. So I thought I was going to be using some pegs here, so drilling in and using some bits of wire to use that as a guide to draw the wing in. But it seems as though I just went for a butt joint in the end. And there we are with the construction complete. So we've got the wheel spats on. From memory, the wing joint and the wheel spats were the places with the biggest problem. You just had to make sure you sanded the joins into the right shape so that it went on nicely. And of course, if you're using super glue, you've got to watch out if you're going to be rescribing that it's a bit brittle, so it doesn't take a scriber too well going around it, so you just got to bear that in mind again. But the major benefits from this, I suppose, are not having huge seams to deal with. There's good weight to the model. You get very, very interesting subjects catered for as well, and it's new techniques, and it's a very different way of going about things, and you tend to end up with a really detailed model out of it. And especially if you get some of the higher end resin kits, it's extremely nice. Nice details all over. As you can see, the panel lining on this one is really sharp and really nice, and I'm just showing here how instead of drawing where that super glue joint is, where I've packed that joint, I actually just use the end of the blade and score it in. And we can see there we've captured the shape of the Miles Hawk nicely, and there's no unnatural seam where that joint goes in around the cockpit openings. One thing to watch out for is where I was sanding down the edges, not to have taken too much off to change the profile of the aircraft and the fuselage. That's one thing to look out for. It's very easily done. And again, just taking things easy, doing it little bit at a time, making sure you're not sanding areas. You wouldn't want to sand that nice ridge going down the side of the fuselage, because then you'd have to put it back in, which could cause problems. The pitot tube, I didn't like what we got in the kit, so I actually made that out of brass wire. And just showing you the exhaust there as well. So, I mean, I've done this Miles Hawk, the RS models HE112 hasn't actually made it out yet. Had a bit of a problem in the painting stage, but it's filmed up to that. So there's no video for that one. What you're seeing here is all I've got. However, this Miles Hawk I did film completely right up to completion. There's some photos coming up shortly just to show you how that one looks as well. So if you want to check that out, I'll put a link up to it at the end of the video, so you can click on that and watch the full build, where I go into a lot more detail as far as the videoing of showing you what I do and how I came about finishing the model. So now we're just looking at some of the actual finished model. So like I said, it's a very enjoyable subject. So hopefully episode 3 has brought the kind of overview of short run and resin kits and things outside of the injection molded kits, I suppose, is what I'm trying to go for. Give something a little bit different, a bit more bit of a different input as far as the modelling scene and what's out there. So I hope that's of interest. Let me know if any of you have built resin models or short run models in the comments below. It'd be nice to see your feedback from where you're building things and what you find difficult, and any problems you think you have, and whether there's anything you could add to what I've said. So that completes episode 3. So thanks for joining in as usual. I hope you're following along with the series. If you haven't already, do consider subscribing. If you want to help out the channel, there's a couple links down below for PayPal or Patreon if you feel inclined. So do please check out the description and have a look at that. I'll give you a link to the Miles Hawk video. There's my email address if you want to get in touch. And any comments, any feedback, anything like that is very welcome. So we'll be back next Tuesday with episode 4, so stay tuned for that one. There'll be stuff going up on the channel outside of these weekly videos as well, so there'll be build videos going up all through this month and next month, and reviews and everything as usual. So stay tuned, keep an eye out for that, and as always, thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.